Well, good morning, Life Point. How we doing today? We alive on Memorial Day weekend. So good to have you. Matter of fact, we cannot let this moment go by on this incredible holiday weekend where we really honor all the men and women who have lost their lives, fought for our freedom so that we could sit in a church like this and worship freely. So can we just go nuts for everybody who served and our gratitude for them, those that are serving right now. We love you. We're grateful. Man, so grateful. And today, like Ridge had just said, this is the finale of a 7-week journey we've been on, really since Easter, called MIXTAPE, talking about love, sex, and marriage. We've been singing a lot of great songs, looking at a lot of the fun ways that we kind of interpret love and really go into God's Word about it. So here's what I want to tell you. If you're a first-time guest today, maybe you came because somebody was dedicating their child and you're like, what is happening? Here's what I encourage you to do, all right? Grab your phone, like right now, you can literally grab your phone right now. Go to YouTube and then type in Life Point Church Fort Mill. Type in Fort Mill, that'll bypass all the other Life Point churches around the country. Hit subscribe, and you can watch all the messages in this series that I think will help get you caught up. And it's just a great way to stay up to date with all the new content that we post. But today, what we're doing is all series, the last 7 weeks, you, the church, have been emailing in, writing out questions that you have about love, sex, and marriage. And today is your day that we're going to answer your questions. And so let me just tell you, y'all, it's about to get real, all right? If you're not used to real talk and honesty in church, this is going to be different for you, but it's going to be great, all right? And so with this, I've got my panel of experts on the stage. Help me welcome the Life Point panel to the stage. I set you up now. We got big things here. No, they're honestly just amazing people that serve at Life Point, volunteers, some are on staff. You're going to get to learn about them, but they're just going to share from their life and really be honest. So let me introduce everybody as a little bit of context so you kind of know who you're hearing from. We've got our life group and care pastor, Pastor Bob, and his amazing wife, Michelle. Yeah. Bob served on our team for the last year and a half, and we haven't ran him off, man.
I want to stay here forever.
We love Bob, and just an amazing guy, oversees a lot of our discipleship and care. And then Michelle serves at Access Counseling, which is a Christian counseling group right here in the greater Charlotte area, so we're going to get to hear from them. And they have a very unique story, that's all I'm going to say. And then we have Scott and his wife, the doctor, Dr. Mary Cummings. And Mary serves as, you can clap for her. Yeah, let's go. Told you, we pulled out the big guns today, so we got the doc in the house. But she serves as a family and marriage therapist and specializes in addiction. So she's got a heart for people if you're willing to specialize in addiction, but has a great, unique advantage point, loves Jesus as well. And then we have at the very end, Danny and Perry Serrano, who incredible volunteers at Life Point. Perry serves on our online campus team with Pastor Ridge, and she does Bible studies, has such a fresh, unique heart for Jesus, and you can't be around her and just not feel it. Even if you don't believe it, you know something's different about her in a positive way. And then Danny serves on our First Impressions. He's our director, so he's basically a volunteer that oversees a lot of teams, from the parking lot to the greeting, to the cleanliness of the building, to the coffee, to the ushering. Matter of fact, if you're grateful that people served you today, can we thank everybody who served us? They don't have to do this. We get to do this. We always say that generosity is a privilege, and one of those expressions is through serving. And Danny and literally hundreds of people make sure that you have a great experience when you come on the campus today. All right, and then we have Kelsey Clifford, and Kelsey is oh wow. Okay, we got some fans. Let's try this again. And we have Kelsey Clifford. Okay, all right, 2 for 2. She's a second grade teacher right across the street at Springfield Elementary. I've known Kelsey since she was in 7th grade. I've seen her. She's just a phenomenal woman. Loves the Lord, loves Jesus, and just happens to be single. Gentlemen, ready to mingle? Let's go. So we got a great perspective from her as well. So before we get into these questions today, that again, I remind you that you submitted. Why do I keep saying that? Because if you don't like these questions, blame the person next to you. That's all I got to say. But Bob and Michelle have a really unique story. Like, I think we all have a unique story. But Bob, in his BC days, before Christ days, listen, the more I get to learn about Bob, my respect level for him just goes really high, okay? This is the full package of a man, and here's what I mean by this, all right? Bob has an alter ego, if you don't know. Poolside Bob comes out every once in a while. And if you want to know more about Poolside Bob, come see me after, and I would love to actually tell you the story where we learned this alter ego. But Bob, before Jesus, owned three.
I've had a few
beauty salons, not barbershops, gentlemen. Beauty salons. That's how secure in his manhood he is. Okay, beauty salons. And then just to redeem him, all the guys are like, "Wow, that's kind of weird." He then sold those and opened a hot dog stand. So only Bob can do perms and blowouts and flip brats. That's all I'm saying. So he's got an incredible story. But before he met Michelle and married her, he was married twice. So share what you learned on this journey. You know, we've talked about Luke 6, building our relationships on the foundation of Christ, and I know you had a few missteps. What do you want to say?
Yeah, so, I mean, we could spend all day unpacking that stuff, but we won't. But there I was, mid-30s, and really just life a bit in shambles. I had been a church attender. The truth was, it wasn't about church attendance. It was I wasn't living for Jesus.
Right.
You know, I could tithe, I could have the marks of Christianity, but not be living for Jesus, and that's who I was. In fact, I'd use it for my benefit and tell people I was a Christian if it would get me what I wanted. So you talk about the wrong way to do that, and. But there I was, mid-30s, 2 divorces. I'd actually lost my career as a hairdresser because of my health. Ended up buying the restaurant and learning all about poverty. But now it was these broken relationships. It was this history of broken relationships and just looking at my life. And so I had to decide what I was going to do with that. And it was really then that God took the opportunity through his Holy Spirit to just transform me. And I surrendered my life fully to Jesus at that point 26 years ago, in which I decided I'm going to do life differently. Bob's way was never going to be the way anymore, and so it was going to be doing it his way, and it changed everything for me. Yeah, and it changed the way I went into relationships. One of the questions that we had received was, how do you know after you've been divorced that you're ready to go into marriage again? And really, for me, it meant unpacking my past, being willing to take responsibility. You know, I could have blamed my ex-spouse, I could have blamed any of the relationships on the brokenness, but the truth was I was the only common denominator, at which point I had to look at myself and go, what needed to change in me to be the person I wanted to be? And so that began the journey, and it meant unpacking those bags. It meant receiving God's grace and forgiving myself, because with it came a ton of regret. And then, you know, Ephesians 5:25 really struck me in that it challenges men to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And so that for me was really challenging, because that meant I had to be willing not to be a doormat for my next relationship or my next spouse, but to be a welcome mat to Jesus, which meant I had to change the way I did things. And so I surrounded myself with men who were doing marriage well and allowed them to invest in me. When I did meet Michelle, it was, we weren't going to have sex outside of the marriage bed, so we saved ourselves for our wedding night. Just did things differently than I'd ever done before. And it was really that began to change who I was, because it was no longer about what Michelle could do for me, but was I willing to lay down my life for her? Yeah, that's good. And that's who I want to be. In fact, it's not very romantic, but I can say it didn't matter who was going to be next to me, because it was more important about who I was going to be. The only benefit was Michelle was attractive, and I wanted her next to me. So that's good. So this is really interesting, right? Michelle meets Bob, obviously, getting ready. She's never been married before. Here comes a guy who owned a couple beauty salons and a hot dog stand and a couple wives, and you're like, that sounds sketchy. But you're 24 years into marriage now. So what was it like early on as a woman who had not been married to marry a man who had been married twice?
Okay, well, I would say never say never, because that kind of was my mantra. I said I would never date somebody who had been divorced, let alone marry somebody. And I know that sounds like a judgmental statement, but it really came out of a lot of insecurity and fear. You know, I grew up in a home where my father had left my mother after multiple affairs that he had had. And so I never really saw what it was like to have a committed relationship between a man and a woman. I didn't grow up with that security that young women long for from their fathers. So I had my own baggage. So not only did Bob have to navigate and show his commitment to me, and that was tough because, you know, I had my own baggage that he had to work through as well. Yeah. So that kind of, you know, set us up for, you know, a pretty challenging first couple years. I would say that it wasn't until when we were dating, what really changed it for me was seeing that Bob was committed to living his life for the Lord. Yeah. And out of his commitment, and I was on that same track. I had changed my life around and I was on that track. And it was out of my desperation for God's grace that I learned to give grace to those who had gone through that, knowing that there were extenuating circumstances, whether it was an unfaithful spouse, if there was abuse, or many other factors that could be involved. So those were the factors that changed in my life. But because we were both playing on the same playing field, you know, we both were abiding by the same rules and aiming for that same goal, that gave us a foundation to build our marriage.
Yeah. And for me, it was, you know, on our wedding day, it wasn't about a promise to Michelle. Yeah. In fact, I was promising God to care for his daughter, which changed that for me because up to that point it was, you make a promise to somebody so you break it. But this was now a promise to God that I would care for his daughter. And that changed that equation for me as well. Yeah. Divorce was not going to be an option.
That's great. And I also learned backstage that Bob still does Michelle's hair. Yeah. I mean, the game on this guy right here. Look at the pants rolled up, no socks. Like, all right. Been there, done that. What you got, young buck? Bob was my COVID house call hair barber during COVID in my garage. Anyways, I might have a man crush. All right, we got to move on. So before we start hearing from the two of you, Scott, Dr. Mary, you guys as well have a blended family. Share a little bit about how that blended, if you will.
Blended, yes.
Yeah.
Well, our story is similar, I think, to many couples, full of ups and downs and challenges. But as it turned out, it sounds more like a romantic story out of the Hallmark Channel. So,
I came to the marriage in a bad state. My wife, a wonderful woman, Marie, had suddenly died, had suddenly passed away, and I was devastated. I had two sons at that time, James, who was a special needs son, age 7, and Dan, age 6.
Yeah. And I was married for 20 years as well to a man named David, who was an Air Force Academy graduate as well as an Air Force pilot. And he, sadly, we were in the Vietnam War. Anybody who knows anything about the Vietnam War, is a very difficult time for all of us. There was a lot of human collateral during that time. People struggled and there was a lot of damage. So, sadly, David suffered some pretty severe mental health problems. He committed adultery and abandoned our marriage after 20 years. So 5 years after I was divorced, Scott and I met through a Christian singles group, and I have to say it was love at first sight. So.
Yeah, it was. Look at this guy. Everyone's like, yeah, we get that.
At that time, when we met, I was a nominal Christian. And Mary suddenly discovered that everything that I needed to be wasn't all there at that point. Simply stated, I did something which was miraculous. I believed that the power of a dangerous prayer could change what did not happen yet in my life. And that dangerous prayer simply was, Lord, if I'm going to lead this family the right way, you've given me a second opportunity here. And I'm going to appeal to you. Please hear this prayer. Move me in the direction I need to move. Show me the way.
Wow.
Help me to get out of your way.
Man, that's good, man. Yeah, that's powerful, powerful. Well, I can't wait to hear from you guys here in a little bit on some of these questions. Kelsey, question for you before we get into this. So I've known you for a long time. You have a genuine relationship with the Lord. I've seen you baptize your parents, just powerful stuff. Share a little bit of some of the challenges as a single adult who loves the Lord, wants to do it the right way, that y'all face in the 21st century.
Yeah, I think something that's really important to preface at the beginning is single does not mean that you're a 20 to 29-year-old person who's never been married. Single is you're divorced and you have 3 kids. Single is you lost your husband or wife. Single is you're going through a separation.
Right.
Any person who is not married to a spouse is a single person. And so I hope today that all single people really get something, out of everybody up here, because it's not just young adults. But I think for me personally, something that has been a challenge is, earlier in this series, we talked about being single and secure. And we talked about how, don't get desperate and don't compromise. However, it's wonderful and that is great things to say, but it's not a formula. You don't do those things and then bam, there's a person and it's amazing. It's also in the waiting, and the waiting is hard. The waiting when God says, no, we're just gonna wait a little while longer. That makes nights really uncomfortable. It makes lonely times. Yeah. So I would say something that's really helped me is to find a community. You have to be with other people that are also experiencing life in the same way. So I think that's been, I would say it's been a big challenge there. Yeah. It's just in that waiting. And especially, like you said, I've done the right things. I love Jesus and I've been committed, but it's now just like, we're gonna wait. Yeah. We're gonna be patient.
Some of the hardest things.
It's hard.
Well, let's get into this. All right, here we go. 11 o'clock, y'all ready for this?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if you're ready for this. Okay, here we go. We're diving in. Question number 1, and Danny and Perry, get ready. I'm gonna put you on the hot seat since we haven't heard from you yet. All right, I'm a Christian, but my spouse is not, and this has created a lot of challenges in our marriage. What advice would you give to me? What'd you guys say?
Well, I'll start it off. Well, in the beginning of our relationship 13 years ago, when we were dating, I wasn't a believer.
Yep.
And so it caused challenges that I wasn't, aware that would happen. She was a believer, I wasn't. She told me that I should believe. I had a lot of questions of why I didn't believe that she couldn't answer because she wasn't sure of why she believed.
Yeah, it's he would ask me why are you a believer? And it really caught me off guard. I was like, I don't know. I've always been a believer. My parents took me to church growing up, and that's just something that I've always believed. So it really stirred a conversation with the Lord and I, why do I believe? And in that time, the Lord also had me stop trying to convince Danny that he needed to believe. He was working on me, and in that time, I committed to prayer. I committed to pray for Danny, Lord, go after him. And in that time, I also had a coworker that was a huge prayer warrior, and I shared with her that I was praying for Danny, and we would pray together. So it was in that surrender of, God, I can't do this. Only you can do this. I don't save anybody. Right. Only Jesus can save.
Right.
So me stepping out of the way.
Yeah. So when the nagging stopped and the prayer started, directly but indirectly found a church where there was a pastor who answered the questions that I thought were so important, and I got into a relationship with the Lord. And now I'm the crazy guy who wears Christian t-shirts that Chris Rook makes fun of. And,
That's great.
I want to talk to people in Walmart about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. I'm like, that's awesome, man. I love it. He's the real deal. And man, you just threw out a tweet right there. Nobody has ever dragged their spouse to Jesus. Yeah. That's so good. So if you're in this category where you've married a non-believer, or both of you maybe weren't believers and one had this relationship encounter with Christ and the other one isn't, love them. You are the best example and expression of love to them. Yep. So let that weight in a healthy way sit on your shoulders and just keep loving them. By the way, can we not compliment Perry's dread hair game right now? My goodness. Cameraman, get a shot on that.
Thank you.
That might be my next.
That wasn't me.
I did it myself.
It doesn't happen
I
every
didn't even have to
relationship.
go to Bob.
All right, here we go. Next question. That was really good. Here's what it says. I'm a young adult. I'm not married. I have given myself sexually to different people. How do I fix my prior mistakes in the eyes of God? How do I fix my prior mistakes in the eyes of God? What an honest question. Who wants this? I see you're leaning. What do you got, doctor?
Well, you know what? One of my favorite stories in the Bible is the adulterous woman with Jesus in John 8.
Yeah.
It's so incredible because it's a demonstration of Christ's grace, right? Not just in the sexual area, but in all areas of our lives. And when he said, "Go and sin no more," it spoke volumes, I think, to all of us about what that grace is all about. It was just a wonderful message for us to internalize. And I really believe that we women struggle with this whole issue of sexual sin. Whether you've been divorced or you're single, you know, as Kelsey was talking about, we always wonder, how does God view that? You know, I'm divorced now and I'm dating, or I'm single and I'm dating, and how's he looking at that? And I really believe that over and over and over again in the Bible, Jesus showed us, demonstrated in his response to other people, grace. You know, grace, grace, grace. And that his intentional will, his desire for us, is that we make good choices.
Right.
But when we don't, and we choose to sin, that we learn how to receive that grace. And I think we women have a hard time receiving that grace, and go and sin no more.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah, that's good. You want to jump in on that too? I know you guys were talking about that.
I think for me, I shared with you a little bit about my past, but I had such a warped perspective on relationships, and I lived out my life in such a destructive way that I had so much shame and regret. So when I turned my life over to Christ, I knew what Scripture said about forgiveness and God's grace. I knew that, but I couldn't forgive myself. I really struggled in that area, and it wasn't until someone said to me, "Michelle, what you're saying is that what Christ did on the cross for you, the ultimate sacrifice, wasn't good enough for your sin." And that changed my perspective, and it helped me to step out of that shame and out of the shadows, because God can use our stories. He can use our stories to help lead others and show them what God's grace looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And I think that's something that all of us, I mean, to some level, are probably wrestling with, whether it's pornography, it's sex before marriage, it's outside, whatever that's looked like. And even the nature of the question, look at the object of that question is I. How do I fix my, right? That's a very American, Western, I have to fix me mentality that we're just kind of naturally ingrained in us. But grace is completely different. The reality is your part in this restoration is to keep seeking Jesus. That's your part. Get lost in him. Yes, your past is a part of your story, and yes, there are earthly consequences, but that's what I love about this relationship that we have with the Lord, and that story of the adulterous woman is so powerful. So good. All right, next question. Here we go. As a teenager, as a parent of a teenager, so Danny and Perry, just get ready. I'm going to come to you guys because you're in this world right now. When and how should we start talking about sex? This was, by the way, one of the number one asked questions that came in. Some version of this right here. So, what do you got?
That was a big question for me too.
Yeah.
Before having a teenager.
Yeah.
But my parents never talked about sex with us. Like, it was something we just didn't talk about. So, I made my mind up pretty early that I was gonna be open with my children about sex, obviously in a age-appropriate way.
Right.
But, you know, I needed to be a person that they could come to and they could talk to. So what I would give advice saying is be your kids' first truth. Because if they go and they hear about sex from anyone else, you have to overwrite that.
Right.
You have to take that truth and convince them that that's not the truth, and then really pour into them like the actual truth. And something that I did with Summer, because I haven't talked to my little guys about it, but with Summer, I remember when Nate, he did a sermon and he compared it to fire. Sex is like fire. In a fireplace, it's beautiful. It is comforting. There are good things that happen when the fire is in a fireplace. But if that fire gets out of the fireplace, it becomes very dangerous. And it can wreck everybody in its path. So it was an easy way. You have to find an easy way to talk to them, because the more uncomfortable you are, the more uncomfortable they will be too. So.
And can I add to that? As a man, it's not comfortable. It's scary. I'm not afraid to admit that.
Especially with a daughter.
Yeah. You don't want to have that conversation, but you have to.
Yeah. Well, and I just love the fact of like honesty. Let there be your first truth. That's gold right there. You know, and because I'm getting ready this summer, my son's 10. We're gonna start the conversation. So y'all pray for your boy, all right? It's gonna be, we're gonna start it. But that's it, like the idea of like sex, we had the sex talk, that needs to go away. It's this conversation, you know, continually having environments, age appropriate, that's really important. All throughout teenage, even young adult is pretty key. That's great. Here we go, next question, let's go to the next one. In this series, we talked about 100% honesty. What are some of the practical ways, Bob and Michelle, I mean husbands and wives, that you can be honest with each other? What do you guys,
Okay,
I mean, because this is so key, right?
Yeah. I would say honesty is such a gift in a marriage. And we don't all give and receive honesty in the same way. I know for me, I grew up in a family of stuffers. You know, we bottled it in, we didn't express ourselves, and I had to learn new ways. And Bob, conversely, grew up in a family who expressed themselves loud and clear with all the bells and whistles. So you can imagine what our first year of marriage was like. It was tough. Yeah. So I had to learn to be able to express to Bob what I was thinking and feeling, because I couldn't hold him responsible for things that I wasn't willing to share. And I also had to learn not to wait until I got all frustrated and it came out in a way that felt like criticism to him or that he was being attacked. So I would encourage you to sit down with your spouse when you're not in the midst of an argument and figure out what's the best way that your spouse gives and receives.
That's good.
And learn to honor that in your conversations. And I know sometimes honesty can sting, and maybe you need a little time to process. Allow your spouse that time. Don't keep pushing. Allow them to go and process and discern what's truth in this and what do I need to adjust.
Yeah.
And then come back and acknowledge what has been said. But I think if you learn to give honesty as a gift to your spouse in love, and you learn to receive honesty from your spouse without being defensive, that sets you up for a whole different level of marriage, and it's a partnership, and it brings about a level of intimacy.
Yeah, Bob, talk about that defensive. You've never dealt with that.
Yeah, well, and that was just some of our problems. It's funny to hear her say only the first year. I mean, first few years were challenging. Short-term memory. But you know, it was my ego that got in the way, and so defending my honor, those kind of things, when I knew what was true, and so I would go into it as a battle versus just allowing truth to be truth.
Yeah.
And then I also learned, working with women and marriages, that security for our brides is everything. Mm-hmm. It's not just a little thing, and it's not financial. In fact, safety is the number one thing in a gal's life. They need to feel secure. They need to feel safe. And so there's no room for white lies. There's no room for half-truths or keeping your wife guessing on what's going on in your mind. You need to be willing to have those conversations. Otherwise, they'll fill in the blank themselves.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to be happening. So that became really important. And you want to take that guessing game out of them. It means, for guys, Michelle has access to my phone, my laptop, my tablets. I mean, I want nothing off limits to her.
That's good.
So that she knows and can be safe of knowing that I'm not in places I shouldn't be, texting people I shouldn't be, having conversations with people I shouldn't be. I want that safety for her. And let me just tell you guys, because I do a bit of counseling with couples, I've been in those situations where it wasn't the adultery that was the struggle for the bride. It was the deception that went with the adultery.
Wow.
She said, I could handle the affair. It was his lying, his persistent lying that really became the difficult thing to overcome. Because now you spend years rebuilding that security, rebuilding that trust. And guys, it takes decades sometimes. Just a white lie can take years to overcome.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it to destroy your relationship that way.
Well, I think this is a great time to point as well, because you might be going, yeah, but where do I start? And I'm suspicious of some things that I don't know. So one of the things that Dr. Marion Scott and Bob Michelle, they're helping lead right now is the Art of Marriage.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday night lifeline experience right here at the church. Child care is provided. It's not too late for you to register. You did miss the first one, but there's 5 more coming up. Just take a step, jump in, be in these environments that I think are naturally going to bring some things to the surface. And that's really our heart, is to help resource you. So, man, appreciate you guys. All right, we got another question. I think we got a single adult. I'm assuming a single wrote this in. Here it is. As a Christian, how do you date in today's world? So, who can answer that one? So, Kelsey, you talked about this a little bit, but why don't you dig in a little more?
Yeah, it's tough. It is really tough to date right now. I always laugh because married people will talk to me and they'll say, oh, I could never date in today's world. And I say, yep, it's real tough. But I think to start off, I think one of the things that you have to do as a single person is to really figure out your expectations going into a relationship.
That's good.
Whether that is, like in my personal story, I grew up in a house where my mom and dad showed such a great example. They set, great examples of how you love each other, how you're there for each other. So I went into relationships with like a 32 bullet point list and was like, well, here you go, because this is what I was brought up on. And you can't just assume that that's going to happen in any relationship. And I think even vice versa, I think about friends I have who are divorced and they're separated, and that's been their relational experience. And so going into a dating relationship, you can't assume that that's how every relationship is going to end. So I think just adjusting your expectations. And I always tell people to have 3 to 5 non-negotiables. But the first one has to be that you both love Jesus. It's not just like what Bob was talking about. You don't just go to church and like, woohoo, I'm a Christian. It's that I'm involved in a community. I'm being with people who also experience life. I'm reading the Bible on my own. I'm doing things with Jesus for me so that I can be a better person for the person I'm dating.
Yeah.
So I think that that's first. And then I also think that, we have talked about in this series that everybody specifically we've talked about in a marriage wants to feel safe, they want to feel seen, and they want to feel satisfied. And I think that that's for singles too. You have to get people in your life that help you feel those things.
Right.
So that when you do get into a dating relationship, you know what to expect. So gentlemen, pursue women. They want to be pursued.
Yeah.
They want to know that you care and that you're willing to put in that work. Ask him on a date. And then ladies, if he asks, go to coffee. It's gonna be all right if it doesn't work. But he's never gonna ask if you keep saying no. So be in community with each other and evaluate those expectations, but also make sure that you are doing what you need to do with Jesus, because that's gonna carry over into your dating relationship. And I think if you're not in a community, my challenge to you is to get one. Yeah. Find a community. Write on your Connect card, life group. If you're single and would like to come to ours, we would love to have you. Yeah. But be with people who are then going to challenge you so that when you do get into dating relationships, you have people that say, yeah, they're really good. Yeah. Or, no, you shouldn't date them. So, yeah.
No, I think that's so good. And you're right. Like when I was dating back in my day, right? I'm like one of those guys now. We didn't have the cell phone and the internet. But so like we actually had to like have a little bit of game and actually ask the person out. But so you've taught me something about this thing called ghosting. So like text messaging, what is ghosting for us old folk?
Okay, so anybody tried online dating?
They're not going to admit it.
Yes,
they all have.
Liars. Anyway,
there's some married couples. No,
online dating, yes, ghosting is a thing. Our culture is now like, I just move on to the next thing so quickly. Yeah. So you get into a conversation and you're like, wow, this is going really well. And either one day goes by and nobody communicates, or something happens and you're like, I'm kind of over it. So then you just abandon the entire relationship.
So it's just easy to get out.
It's just easy. It's whatever is convenient for me at the moment.
Don't ghost. Would you say guys more ghost or women more ghost?
No, I think both do.
It's down the middle.
Yeah.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, we've got time for one more question. So this is going to be our finale question here. Here's what it says. In our marriage, we don't talk about sex. Our sex life is okay, but how do we begin to develop a healthy conversation around sex? Sounds like a doctor question. Scott and Mary, what do you guys, can I put you on the spot? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, we had issues on our issues with two 20-year marriages coming together, two children who'd lost their mother, and a special needs guy who needed extra attention and help.
Yeah.
So we did get a year of premarital counseling before we got married, and I would advise anybody who does a blended family to do that. It is tremendous. But in our sexual life together over 26 years, I would say it's been great. And it's been great because Scott has a tremendous sense of humor. And when crazy things happen, as we all know, in a married sexual life, and when things would go crazy or things would happen, he would make some ridiculous comment or some crazy, hilarious remark, and it would make me laugh. And I'd start laughing, and he'd start laughing, and then we'd laugh together, and it sort of worked out.
So you're saying make sex jokes. That's, this is the prescribed medicine from, I love it. No, but it's so good. It breaks the wall. I mean, it's
does.
It's huge.
I'm telling you, it really helps.
That's really great. That's
He has
really
a great
great.
sense of
What would you add to that?
In the beginning,
Yeah.
Mary would come to me and she would say interesting thing like this: we need to take some time and choose a topic, and we need to talk about fill in the blank. And I would go, like that, because previously in a previous marriage, that kind of stuff never went on.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was some relearning that had to go on. And part of the issue was, if you go all the way back, was the fact that when we first got together, I heard these words: we need to do premarital counseling for a year. And I went, a year? I said, I'm married for 20 years, you're married for 20 years, it adds up to 40 years. Doesn't that count for something?
Right, yeah.
I was wrong,
Yeah.
I admit it. The counseling that we did, the conversations that we had, inviting God into the conversations and say, Lord, okay, show us the way. Show us through this topic, this conversation, this question. Help us to come out the other side as we need to come out the other side. And you know what? With a good sense of humor, and Mary's a great audience. I mean, I would say something, she'd go, ah! She'd start laughing.
Right.
And it just broke the ice. She was telling me it was okay to pursue her, which, as we heard from Kelsey, is a huge thing. And I went, oh, it's okay to pursue you. I can run faster than you.
Yeah.
So simply stated, with the counseling, with the conversations that we had, and we did regularly schedule these conversations.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, we walked through a lot of issues in a healthy way, in a fun way. Highly recommended.
Yeah, that's good. And we're, as you can tell, we're team counseling here at Life Point. We just believe in it.
Yeah.
We believe in the power of it, that don't wait until the red gauge, the gauge is in the red and your engine's overheating and blowing up. You can do that kind of counseling and we're here for you, but I would rather do regular maintenance, check-ins. So let's do this. Bob, Michelle, we're gonna give you guys the final word. What would you guys say? Maybe some advice to wrap this up. And man, we could keep going. Y'all should watch the 9 o'clock because we actually had some different content with that one. But let's wrap it up with you guys. What's some advice to our church family?
Okay. Well, I would say I was a debater growing up, and so I brought that to my marriage. And when you had an argument, you fought to win, and that's how I approached it. And again, we had a number of years of challenge early on in our marriage. And my brother wisely said to me, Michelle, you can fight to win every argument, or you can lose your marriage. You choose.
Wow.
And I chose to win in my marriage. So I had to learn to approach a disagreement in a way that I could just speak the truth of what I was feeling and let it be without pushing, without trying to convince Bob, and just let it be. And more often than not, Bob would choose to hear my feelings and selflessly make adjustments for my benefit, and vice versa, because we weren't fighting it out. We were hearing each other.
So important.
And I couldn't keep up with her. I needed to process, so it was really hard. But for me, I think, we did say it at the 9 o'clock, was, communicating those expectations to me is so important. Yeah. If we allow resentfulness, bitterness to begin to enter in, that's on us. We have to be willing to have those conversations. Yeah. Because if your spouse doesn't know what your expectations are, how can you hold them accountable to that? So I think that's so critical. Yeah. And then the theme of this series really has been get help. It is so important that you don't do marriage alone, whether it's being in community with others, like in a life group where you have accountability and you're learning from others. I mean, that's what I did. I surrounded myself with people who were doing marriage and could call me out. I had men call me out when I wasn't dating Michelle in the way that I should. And challenge me to really love her and pursue her the way I needed to do. So it really is that communicating expectations, and then being willing to work on it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I hope today and the last 7 weeks have been life-giving to you, to your family. I pray that it's hopefully just been the beginning of some great family of origin. We talked about that week 1 shifts that you're beginning to make ultimately so that you can leave a better legacy. Or if you had great parents and you were very privileged, that you can continue that for your kids as well. So would you guys help me thank my panel today? Didn't they do a great job? Did they make their way off? We appreciate you guys. Thank you. As we get ready to close, I do want to just highlight, even though we're going to be moving on as a church to different topics and parts of the Bible next week, art of marriage. Art of marriage. Would you consider that? If you're not in a life group or you've never been a part of one, it's an easy first step to take. All you got to do is text the number on the screen here. And this isn't signing you up. It's just saying, you know what, I want to get a little bit more of information about this. We want to take a step. And gentlemen, I encourage you as the man, be the leader in that. If you know that's important to your spouse, say, you know what, I think we need to do this to grow closer together. And at the end of the day, we know that the enemy does not want to see your marriage survive. The family value, the nucleus of the home, is the greatest, most powerful thing in our culture. And it's the reason why I feel like so many marriages and parenting is under attack, because the enemy knows the power of what a husband and a wife who love the Lord, love each other, and raising their kids in that way. He knows what it can do to someone who is divorced, to try to keep them just down in guilt and down in sorrow and make them feel like their best days are behind them. But I hope you hear today that we do believe your best days are in front of you. And so we want to celebrate. We want to respond to that. So would you just stand to your feet? We're going to actually sing now. We flipped the whole service around and we're going to worship. We're going to give you an opportunity to really just respond to God's goodness no matter where you're at. And we don't worship and sing these songs if only life is going well. Matter of fact, I think our worship and our declaration back to God means that much more, even when life is challenging. So I encourage you over these next couple songs that the band's gonna do, just to have this moment between you and the Lord, wherever you're at, and know that God is for you, and He loves you, and He's got plans for your life, and His grace is real. And so, Lord, we just cling to that. God, to me, that's truth. That's not a flashy statement on a bumper sticker, but it's true. You are a good Father who loves us, His kids. And there's nothing that can separate us from your love. No bad choice, no marriage, no sexual experience, no sin, God, could keep us from you. But God, we know the weight that we carry around. So God, I just pray as we sing these words about freedom, words like hell lost another one, I'm free. Words about I'm not enough unless you come. God, these are anthem songs, God, of a posture of our heart that we believe truly of your love and affection for us. And so God, that's what we want today as we worship you. We love you. We pray this in your name. Amen.